What else? Something happened here. Just one second. Okay, there you go. All right.
Uh,
So
so
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, joining me today obviously is Dr. Miyamoto, world-leading expert in disaster resiliency, response, and reconstruction. He's provided expert engineering and policy consultation to the World Bank, USAID, UN agencies, and as well as governments. He's California Seismic Safety Commissioner, as well as the global CEO of Miyamoto International, as well as a structural engineer. Uh, um, Dr. Miyamoto, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Sure, there's no problems at all. Welcome to my kitchen.
Yeah, we can start there. I mean, how are you and your family first of all handling all this COVID-19 craziness?
Well, I mean, that's a horrible things, right? I mean, if they ever get locked down and the people lose jobs and, people get sick and just even die. I mean, just horrible things. But I think we're making really best out of it as a company, and also personally, company wise, we're kind of already remotely working kind of company already anyway. We get
Right.
120 people spread out all over the whole US and 150 additional in all over the place in the world, right? So we're kind of remotely working kind of a people already. So it didn't really impact us in a substantial way, actually. So that was good. And personally, I spend more time. Actually, I'm much more effective, I think, and it's spend more time and with my family, my kids, you know,
I think it'll be
personal time.
surprising to see. I think it'll be surprising to see just how this affects businesses globally. As we start to move back to some semblance of normalcy, if you will. It'll be interesting to see how what comes of this.
Yeah,
Maybe just a brief introduction about yourself, a little background information on Miyamoto International and Miyamoto Relief, if you will.
yeah, sure. I mean, well, personally, I was born and grew up in Japan, and when I turned 18, I decided to play for Dallas Cowboys. So I told my mom, Dad, I got to move to United States to play for Dallas Cowboys. Didn't quite work out that way, but I played for college for a couple of years, and after that, I blew my knee, and Plan B was being a structural engineer. So that's. I went to California State Universities for my master's and my bachelor's and master, and I went back to Japan, Tokyo, to finish my PhD from Tokyo Institute of Technology. And this is about the whole fluid viscous damping devices and its own risk factor involved. So that was the things like that. And Miyamoto International Inc., we are located in 4 different continents and throughout the California cities and Nevada. And we have 25 different offices globally. And we are focused on many different things. And obviously, disaster risk assessment and response, recovery, reconstruction is one thing we do. But also we have done many years for designing, engineering for the performance-based engineering, especially used in fluid viscous dampers, base stations, and others over the world.
So, talk to me a little bit more about Miyamoto Relief, especially with regard. I know on your website you talk about obviously the devastation in Japan and how that kind of really impacted your opinion, especially regarding schools and children. Talk to me a little bit about Japan, maybe Haiti, and then we can move more towards what just happened in Puerto Rico.
Sure. So our company, Miyamoto International Inc., we are a purpose-driven company. What we want to do is not only just do the engineering, but we want to make things safer and better for the people, to the world. That's our mission. And so as a business, we can do a lot. As an engineering business, we can do a lot of things in a society to make things better and safer, right? There's the clients and there's from public sectors, private sectors, we can do a lot of good things, from a disaster response to engineering dampers, you name it.
Right.
But there is a segment of society, absolutely, there's no money. No money from public, there's no money from a private sector, nothing, no investment. But there are still needs exist. There's a needs for better, safer construction. So that's already at the Miyamoto Relief. We built Miyamoto Relief there. That's a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it can raise the money. And we activate other engine companies, to basically we donate at times the money, so as the other people do basically the same thing to tackle those issues safety issues, especially at the school buildings, school kids, and heritage buildings. And we actually get into now the water issues and stuff like that. So that's something we do as a Miyamoto relief. Then that we have like a wholesome impact. That's our purpose, to make things better and safer for the whole to the world, essentially. That's why. And for the Miyamoto relief, why we started, well, that's the reason of it. But one thing we noticed that 2008 Sichuan, China earthquake, magnitude 9, killed hundreds, who knows, tens of thousands of people. No one really know exactly what the final count is like, because such a huge event. And one thing we noticed that when we visit throughout the whole Sichuan, about, I don't know, those schools we saw, there are, those school buildings in China was big one, 3-story, 4-story, huge concrete structures and built maybe 10, 20 years ago. And the construction type is a pretty dangerous one. Many are non-ductile concrete structures, or many are precast concrete planks sit on brick walls. It's very dangerous construction, obviously. Unfortunately, earthquake was the Monday afternoon. School was a full session. So they lost 1,000 students. I was on one building site, school site, which we knew, they told me there's about 2,000 to 5,000 students who are in there. They completely collapsed. No one escaped, actually. So seeing things like that, we saw that, hey, you know what? I think engineers, we can do something about these issues. We can do something about school safety, not only in, say, California or US, but globally. That's what really motivated us to really organize the Miyamoto Global Disaster Relief. And after 2011 tsunami in the Tohoku area, Japan, that's where that we actually formalized this non-profit organization to raise money for the victims. So that's how we start there. Now it's a small organization still, the Miyamoto Global Disaster Relief, but it's a pretty impactful. That organization won about 3 different the best project of the year by the Engineering News and Record, which is actually pretty amazing,
Yeah.
And it's pretty incredible, actually. And because that's how we went about it, how we actually did level it to people, and how impactful to the community and the society done that projects for. And right now in Ethiopia, actually, we found a place where the water is gone because of the dams built, and so affecting the tribes living there for thousands of years, and has a very distinct cultural language. So we actually engaged the other water civil engineering companies from the United States, and they volunteer their time and providing the expertise there to create the solar power, the irrigation system. So things like that, we're actually doing it. And we're also doing in the US too. We have the event called the Night of 1,000 Drawings. We done that in LA, in the Sacramento. Essentially what it is the usual drawings.
Yeah.
You donate, and we throw some big party, and we raise money for especially the inner city schools. That's what we're doing in the US, actually. It's been extremely successful event. Unfortunately, we have to postpone this one. What's supposed to be happening right now, but we will postpone to the coming fall, actually. So that's what we're doing now.
And I know we're looking forward to see and be a part of that event as well.
Yeah, that's right. Taylor Devices has been a great partner for a few years now for this.
So I understand recently you're probably just coming back or have been making a few trips to Puerto Rico. I know you've recently expanded there as well. Maybe just give your firsthand experience on what you saw and just the state over there.
Sure. I mean, Puerto Rico is a part of the United States. It's a territory of U.S., right? So it's definitely the engine capacity license system, universities and stuff like that. It's equal to what we are in the U.S. So they are good engineers, but only issue they had is that lack of manpower or lack of understanding of earthquake, because hurricanes hit the islands all the time. But earthquake disaster like this one is something new for them. The last one is really over 100 years ago. So wow. There's no how the society reacted to it. Sometimes that we see a case like this. Sometimes many cases the countries or society or community sometimes overreact certain cases. So we basically try to assist the government, private sector, people, homeowners, to basically clearly identify that what the damage is, what's not repairable, and how to fix it, how much, things like that. They really need it, right? So that's what we've been doing there. So we basically opened the Puerto Rico Miyamoto office there, and we hired local engineers because, as I said, they have a huge capacity there. Just to combine our so-called disaster, earthquake experience, knowledge with their expertise, combine that, and that's how actually we formed a company to help.
So bringing this back to California, kind of the state of the industry. We've talked a little bit just briefly there about homeowners and just awareness, and what do you feel the industry is, just from an awareness perspective? How aware is the average resident or even building owner of just how devastating these earthquakes can be? I mean, obviously, most people, even my age, 30 or younger, have never really felt a big earthquake, right? They've always been told, they've always been educated that they can happen. There's been an increase in awareness and drills and preparations for the big one, if you will. I guess just your perspective on, what is the awareness level there from residents and building owners?
I think, California never really experienced a true sense of urban disaster since 1906, by the way. And Loma Prieta in 1989 and in 1994, the Northridge, they're somewhat medium earthquakes, essentially.
Right.
And a true urban disaster is nothing like that. It's much, much, much intense. That's something that we're expecting to have here. The last big one, truly, the Northridge, is almost 25 years ago. And it's definitely the Bay Area, San Francisco area, and Southern California. Prediction of the big earthquake is very high. I'm talking about 60-70% and probability happening next 20-30 years time, right? So the chances that during our lifetimes, yours and mine, we're going to see that event happens. So it's really important to kind of prepare right now. And there's many ways of doing it, and how people see it. Well, I think there's definitely a false sense of a kind of security about hey, we survived the Northridge event, we survived the Loma Prieta event, that type of kind of feeling about it. And say, hey, my building met the building code, so therefore it's earthquake proof. Mm-hmm. There's definitely myth concept about this kind of following the building code. It's just enough. It's not really true, obviously. So right. It's definitely better than not following it. So you're going to see that what happened to Port-au-Prince and Haiti, right? 2010 magnitude 7 event, destroyed about 250,000 buildings and killed almost 300,000 people or more. That you're going to see in the U.S. But we will lose a few thousand people, and we will lose we're going to have a huge economical impact. Gigantic. We're going to lose economical impact. The estimate is over $600 billion in a Bay Area or San Francisco. Things like that could happen. The reason is because it's not like building code is bad, but building code is really meant to be to protect lives. Hopefully the big shake happens and there's we rely on the inelastic behavior, so energy absorption of the so-called structural or earthquake or architectural damage to absorb the energy, right? So because of the kind of concept is set up like that, so there would be quite a bit of structural damage or inelastic behavior. So what's going to happen? Then the building like that can be repaired. Well, most people, if they're building tilted and a whole bunch of cracks, especially concrete structures, so it'll be very difficult to repair back. 2011 Christchurch earthquake. Obviously in New Zealand, their building code, their engineers is obviously good as ours, if it's not better actually, by the way. However, out of about 2,400 modern construction in New Zealand, Christchurch at the time, they lost almost 90% of them. They only lost about 200 people or less, though, in a town of about 350,000 people. Right. So it's definitely so-called met the intent of a building code, right? Try to basically save the lives. Most of the fatality is come from the two buildings, by the way. The order construction. So it's kind of met the intent of a building code by saving lives. But that's what it is. The building code, minimum building code, does not protect that city or building for being
Right.
able to use after the major earthquake event. Buildings may not be repairable. That's the whole concepts like that. So today, unfortunately, after almost 10 years now, if you visit the Christchurch, still half of Christchurch is an empty parking lot or parks in a sense. Because once you take down the buildings like that, it's very difficult to build back again. It's economically very difficult. It's really killed the businesses and economical activity of the cities. So it makes it really difficult. That's why I think doing little more than building code is good idea. In a Christchurch, if you go back there, all the new construction, they're using the main different things from a base isolation to dampers to the backbone restraint braces, you name it. So try to have the much more rather than just do it the easy and a fast way. Try to understand the actual displacement demand of a structure and
Right.
try to do performance-based engineering. So there's definitely a good trend out there. But that's something but that's just after the fact, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's always like that. After the fact, society and so, oh my God, we got to do something. Building codes not good enough, and engineers say, oh, by the way, here's we know this, we knew about this. Here's the options. So unfortunate. I think that's something that we are, every cities, every states we go, every countries we go, we definitely try to put this understanding of what the building code minimum is like. If you spend so much, usually it's very small amount of money, right?
Right.
And our experience is about 1% to 2% of a total construction cost difference to add in the fluid viscous dampers or other methods to make this much more resilient than it was before. So we try to preach, all over the places, and is successful? Well, we try. You see that the LA and the Sacramento, Orange, San Francisco, where we are very active on, there are some certain buildings we're able to convince to do things like that. But in many cases, even us, we're not really successful. But it just depends on where you're at. Like for example, if you go to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, there's probably half dozen buildings with dampers in Port-au-Prince
Right.
because they experienced that thing, so they feel like they need to do a little more than a code.
So, I mean, in your opinion, do you feel that obviously certain cities, certain municipalities have started introducing ordinances, right? They're starting to slowly, progressively increase the standards, in these buildings. I guess, do you feel that it's going to take some kind of big event in order to really make progress, or do you feel that there's being progress made now?
I think as engineers, we need to really give the information. I think that's our duty, So every time it may not be successful, we got to give the information. Here's a minimum code building. What could happen? Here's if you spend a 2% amount of construction cost, what it's look like, what could happen? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So the investors or public agencies or homeowners even, they can see the so-called cost benefit of that thing,
Right.
that they can make the sound decision based on that. And that's how we approach for every single project we do. I would say probably in California, after go through this whole exercise, like maybe one out of about five buildings investors, or they go more than that, But unfortunately, 4 out of 5, no, they just give me a minimum code, But
Right.
that's okay, that's all right.
Yeah.
I think that's what the additions the public people have, they have to make. But to me, most important thing is as engineers, we have to provide the information so they can make the decision based on these financials or safety or business continuations, stuff like that.
Right, and obviously that's a goal for us as well. I mean, when you try to talk to an owner or engineers, you always try to explain that for that additional, like you said, 2-3% additional cost. Like not only you really have to go and explain the ROI, the long term cost benefit of implementing these devices from the start, and versus losing the building and having to tear down and rebuild.
That is so true. I mean, even in Kathmandu, Nepal, we are finishing in a 16-story, the 5-star Hilton, Kathmandu Hilton projects. It's a new construction, and we met the owners group about almost like 5 years ago now about their investment, and they're local people. And their investment goal is they want to keep this building minimum of 25 years or something like that, right?
Sure.
And we kind of figured out what would be the probability of an earthquake could happen in the next 25 years in Kathmandu, which is actually fairly high. And we told them what would be a potential damage look like, what would be the permanent displacement of the building look like, even new construction. Mm-hmm. And when they saw the thing, wow, that does not quite work out for us. No, I'll invest this. I want to keep this for 25 years. So, earthquake insurance is not really robust there. What we can do? Okay, we'll give you options. And that time, I think I contacted you guys, using the fluid viscous dampers in a certain places in the building. It's only level 1, 2, 3 because they had us architecturally have this soft story, exist.
Right.
So we provide damping devices, and it was around $500,000. That seems it's not much here in the U.S., but that's a big money in the Kathmandu, believe me. Even 16-story building. They said that's exactly what we want to do. Sign me up. So that's what they're doing right now as we speak at their construction like that. So it's depends on, but that's again benefit was that they had an earthquake in 2015, which killed almost 10,000 people in the country.
Right.
So that motivate that kind of things. So our challenge is before that happens like that, how can we communicate better to the communities in these countries to do this, including the U.S., including California.
Right, and I think some of the responsibility does fall on the owners of the ownership groups, as far as just making sure that they are preparing for that, and it is difficult, right? It is hard to. It should be that because some owners, some groups, like you said, only plan to keep a building for a certain amount of time before they may sell it off, or it's very uncommon so far in my experience to find those portfolio-based owners that tend to keep buildings or projects longer than that 25 years, for example.
I think so. I think that someone decide to own like 10 years, that you can start having discussion of this kind of things, I think, But typical commercial development business in California, 4 years, just go, keep churning it, right? Then it'll be very difficult to basically, even that they see the value of it. But in their mind, 4 years. Question is, what's the probability of something happening in 4 years? Fairly small. Mm-hmm. So, longer term, the probability of things happening higher, right? So if they see a probability of it, like, okay, thanks for the information. I understand that. But minimum building code is good enough. That's right. Okay too. That's their essentially investment decisions making it. Is that good for the community? Probably not, because that building would be not really good after the 1907 event, right?
Right. I know a project we share in Sacramento, 555 North Main. One of the big pros that we, when we talk about that building, is that because of the implementation and because of the inclusion of a fluid viscous damper system, they were able to save on the earthquake insurance, right? So the ROI of actually getting and installing these devices was actually net zero after 3 or 4 years of not paying insurance, right? Yeah.
No, that was actually challenging job, and that was I think built it's a concrete structure with a soft story built in 1960s or something like that. It's a completely non-ductile concrete construction, and Sacramento even seismicity is a pretty moderate compared to like Bay Area or LA. Still risk exists, and actually that building shook up quite a bit by the Napa earthquake a couple years back, right? And that was the building which is the occupied by the headquarters of this pretty sizable developer company, right. And they are paying quite a bit of earthquake insurance. You're right, several $100,000. And the one thing they want to do is obviously they have been headquarter buildings. First thing they want to make sure that buildings be able to occupy after the major event. That's something they really want to do that, Right. But two, they want to control this insurance cost because they're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars per year.
Right.
And in their mind, they have a huge capital base. So they think they can actually self-insure this thing, especially if the damage can be limited. That's why the word viscous dampers, fully viscous dampers, definitely was a perfect solution for them. So pretty limited amount of the business interruption during the construction, actually almost none, and put the viscous dampers. Today, it's all done. They got the restaurants and bars there. They apparently they showed us big dampers right next to the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. That was definitely a success story. The fact is motivation is immediately just basically 3 years return on investment to make the buildings better. Actually,
Yeah.
that was a good one actually.
Right. And we talk about too, just you mentioned it briefly there, just the immediate occupancy of a building. That's something that is, in my opinion, often overlooked when talking about these systems, especially when you're considering all the commuters, people who depend on work, who depend on, providing for their families, to be able to, feel more comfortable knowing that where their place of employment, where they're working every day, they're driving to and from. And I mean, obviously California traffic, you're spending enough time driving as it is. Just to know that that's still there for them, right? In the event of an earthquake, knowing that their place of employment will be there.
That's right, exactly. Or schools, right?
Right. Hospitals, everything.
Hospitals, yeah, exactly. Universities, homes,
Right.
Yeah.
We can quickly shift gears just to I'd love to talk about the differences perhaps in codes versus Japan and the United States, and a little bit too about just obviously the preference for more base isolation type projects in Japan we see than here.
Yeah, I mean there are a couple of reasons. One is the Kobe earthquake in 1995 they went through, and it was a bad one, right? They lost 6,000 people. The economic impact is huge in Kobe. It's a big city. And they also saw the base isolated buildings perform so well, so well. So the public, everybody knows about base isolation. It's like a common language, it's called mention. It's a common just vocabulary in Japan, actually.
Right.
Yeah, just like apple pie almost, Everybody knows this base isolation is the really the good stuff. They know that.
Right.
So that's the one thing. And also because of that, like if you take the subway in Japan, there's a big advertisement of a new apartment or condo buildings, right? They talk about this is a base isolated, structure,
right?
Building, and people pay premium for that,
Right.
So actually, there's a good return of investment. Just even that the commercial developers who just looking to just sell fast, they see that the commercial value to that, right? I think that's really the one big driver. Second driver is the Japanese building code is much more conservative, especially the building, the taller buildings, high-rise buildings. The actually drift limit is the twice more. For example, in the U.S., we allowed the building to drift percent spent for 2% of story height drift, right? Japan is 1%. So to make 1%, it's a pretty difficult thing to do, just to do using just pure concrete and steel and stuff like that. So for them actually using the isolation or using dampers, it's cheaper building, by the way, because they can use a performance-based engine to basically control that displacement essentially. So It's a code-driven. It's a lot to do with the code-driven also. So combination of public awareness, public wants, and also the Japanese codes are very conservative, especially high-rise buildings for the drift criteria. That's why there's over 10,000 structures base isolated in Japan. And those buildings also not only base isolated, but there's dampers to go to basically control that displacement also. Tail devices, you guys got a lot of dampers in Japan.
Yeah, we do. And I think some of that has to do obviously just to the, I guess, more frequency with earthquakes in Japan as opposed to California, obviously. I guess that's where a lot of that, the desire, the public awareness, obviously social media wasn't a thing during the Northridge earthquake or anything like that. So the amount that news was shared about the event, or even just how much was talked about it, probably isn't as top of mind, I guess, as it is in Japan.
Yeah, well, I mean, at Japan, they go through probably average every 5 years some gigantic earthquake in one of those cities. Pretty much average someone there. So it's constant. Just a reminder, it's always there.
The last thing I want to touch on is just, what do you think the future of the industry is? Like in your mind, in 20 years, what would you like to see how the code and the trends kind of develop in California?
I don't believe that the building code should tell people to say you have to do immediate occupancy. I think code give you options. Code should give you an option for life safety options, and here's the immediate occupancy options based on displacement based engineering and stuff like that. Not just a purely adding the force levels and stuff like that.
Right.
I think it should it be kind of that kind of system. People have options for it to communicate to it. I just don't subscribe to it that we have to use a 50% higher seismic force for every single buildings. I think it's a correct approach. Actually, the buildings, if you design per building code today without adding anything, perform pretty good actually. Performance is not bad. Mm-hmm. Probability of collapse is probably 1-2% range actually. So it's not bad at all. But it's just so it's just the options, right? But once come to like important buildings, like critical structures, obviously hospitals and schools, some of the corporate headquarters, some really key functionality things going on, lifeline structures. I think using performance-based engineering, displacement-based engineering, using dampers, isolations, all other methods, BRB, all the things. I think that's a really important one. Just purely rely on the energy dissipation by these plastic hinge formations in a vertical loading carrying components is, to me, in my opinion, things will pass to me. I'm sure many just don't agree with me on that one, but I think nice to be able to fix the buildings after the major earthquake event,
right,
easily,
right.
And it's available. It's available today, so why not?
Right. I mean, the technology exists now. I think there's going to be some sort of cooperation or need rather from insurance companies to, like you said, give options, right? If there's incentivized benefits to pursuing a certain tier, maybe lower premiums, for example, maybe you do see something like that where there are tiers to immediate occupancy or resiliency in a structure.
I think that the working insurance industry could be difficult because there's not enough those stock of buildings, isolation dampers to make a difference, I think, for them. But banking industry may be easier. The reason that the previous story about the Sacramento projects we're talking about, because if the PML, the probable maximal loss, is less than 20%, then they don't have to have this by the earthquake insurance. That was motivation for them. They want to basically self-insure. They want to basically put the money at work, but that capital sits there to be able to basically self-insure the buildings essentially. Otherwise, they have no options. It was like a PML was over 30%, I think that building was. So for 30%, obviously they have bank that will not finance them unless they have an earthquake insurance, really expensive one. So using viscous dampers, we cut down from 30% or something down like 10% range, I believe, something like that.
Right.
So that made it basically, okay, banks said, okay, that's fine, you don't have to have insurance. That's how the savings actually come from.
Well, I think that's all I have here in my notes. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about today?
No, I think it was good talk. I mean, I think pretty much covered from Dallas Cowboys to Haiti to the insurance industry.
Yes. Obviously, I really appreciate your time, especially in the midst of all of this COVID craziness.
I think of what you guys doing as a tail devices. I think you guys do great things over the years. I mean, you guys predominantly originate from the aerospace and military components of it, but you got into the civil engineering market 30 years ago, something there. So you have a track record of working through this whole world, and it's really you guys are providing a tool in a toolbox. Right. Sure, my PhD is in that fluid viscous dampers, and it's all risk modeling and all that stuff. Right. But it's just one tool in toolbox, pretty good one. But there's many different tools to do this work actually. Right. So I think for you guys providing such a great tool for us, I think that's a great thing. I really appreciate you guys doing that. It's really important. Not many companies in the world making that. So
that's right.
It's important.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time, Dr. Miyamoto. We also look forward to maybe getting out to your event here in the fall if we can get rescheduled after all this craziness.
Sounds good. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.